Ruslan Trad is a freelance columnist, journalist, and author with a focus on Russia, Syria, conflicts, hybrid warfare, and mercenaries. Ruslan is a member of the Association of European Journalists, Bulgaria, and co-founder of the Bulgarian Journal de Militari.
How is the Russian disinformation functioning in general?
We should say directly that such campaign or campaigns involved in one bigger campaign is coordinated directly by the Kremlin administration. This is not just a campaign funded by some oligarchs or media linked to the Kremlin. This is a centralized effort. So when we are discussing such campaigns and how these campaigns affecting electoral process or affecting local politicians and political process in different countries, this should be very clearly understood that we are speaking about a centralized campaign funded by different people, oligarchs or agencies inside the Kremlin administration, but all orders are coordinated. So we are not speaking just for ordinary campaign. And this is the reason why when we're speaking about Russian campaign, mostly we are using state-backed campaign as a term.
Is Russian propaganda finally been understood by the Western countries as a serious problem?
I think so, but I'm a little bit pessimistic about that. The reason for my opinion is that we are already late in countering this campaign. The first signal was of the current propaganda campaign backed by the Kremlin administration under Putin rule in Moscow is around 10 years ago or even more. If we speak, for example, of Ukraine, you can speak that you should mention that such campaigns existed even 2004. When was the first attempt for influencing the government of Ukraine by the Kremlin. Also, we have such signals in the Balkans, which is one of the main targeted regions of the Russian propaganda. And we can also see how this campaign and the whole structure of the campaign is evolving in Middle East thanks to the Russian involvement in Syrian civil war, and later in Libya and Central African Republic, which is one of the newest examples of how this infrastructure works. So yes, in one hand, European Union and the West in general already knew about this campaign and the propaganda tools used by Kremlin. Some of the analysts arguing that this is not so sophisticated campaign or structure, but in my opinion, this is one of the reasons why the Russian propaganda is so successful. We underestimated the power of this tool, even with how to say the democratic values are one of the reasons why such propaganda won so many hearts and souls in Western Europe, for example, because the principle of not interfering in personal opinion or giving the two sides visibility in the news editions, and Russians are working very well to make this in their benefit, their own benefit. So in that line of thought, yes, the European Union already acknowledged that this campaign and the whole network of propaganda and propaganda tools by the Kremlin is dangerous even for the security of the Union. And they acknowledged already that this campaign affected deeply even the electoral processes in different countries, member states of the European Union. But still, the answer is slow.
You mentioned Syria crisis, and that is one topic you have analyzed a lot. Can you tell us how Russian propaganda works in Syria crisis?
This propaganda is continuing in Syria and in the wider region also. Comparing different fields of this propaganda, we can see very common tools used by Kremlin in different regions, despite they localized these attempts. For example, in Syria, we have trying to affect and influence the local population, when in the same time Russian command is working mostly with the political elite and officers in Syria, but media like Russia Today or Arabic versions of other Russian state-funded media in the region, not only in Syria, but the whole Middle East, we can see the pattern of using the same tools for propaganda used in Western Europe or Eastern Europe and the Balkans, trying to make the West guilty for every bad thing in the world. In the same time, promoting the peaceful mission of Russian Federation and how Russia is helping actually, for example, local Syrians with distributing humanitarian aid. This is one of the main points, to be precise, of the Russian propaganda in Syria, how Russian state provided humanitarian aid to affected by the war Syrians. And this one-side story is very popular in the region, but in my opinion, not like, for example, Africa or Eastern Europe. The local population is not so satisfied with the talking points promoted by the Kremlin. But in the same time, many of the locals, when we are reading comments, for example, in social media like Twitter and Facebook, under articles shared by Russia Today or other Russian media, we can see that Syrians, for example, are dissatisfied with both Russia and the West. And this is also opportunity for Russia, using many times during the last 10 years. How to use the dissatisfaction for own benefit. In example of Syria, this is promoting the stabilizing role of the Kremlin, as I mentioned before, the humanitarian aid, and also that the West is the West forgot about the Middle East, and that is why Russia is there and helping people. This is the talking point in general.
Can you compare disinformation and Russian propaganda in Syria and now Ukraine? Does it have similarities, differences, or it is the same strategy?
In general, the strategy is the same. With every kind of tool, we experience it in Eastern Europe. You can see the track in Syria and in Middle East in general. But we can see also localized content. And if we take example from Telegram channels, there are many such Telegram channels baked and linked to Kremlin administration. And the talking points are almost the same, but translated into local languages, which is actually very successful tool and part of the propaganda, because people are much more delighted to read news on their languages. And in the same time, in that way, Russia can promote own talking points. So Syria and Ukraine, Russians are using almost the same infrastructure like Russia Today or Sputnik, but with local content, and they hiring local editors, for example, local journalists, promoting very good salaries, which is you can imagine this when your country is in war, and so you need this material thing. And this is interesting that I expected the talking points to be a little bit different between Ukraine and Syria, but Russians are really using almost the same content, just a little bit localized on the field. I'm not sure why they're doing like that, because this is, in my opinion, a weak link in the whole campaign. But for now, is some kind successful for their purposes.
How is the influence of Russian propaganda and disinformation in the Balkans? In which state do we see more Russian presence?
Serbia is a very important country for Russia, and the whole region, Western Balkans, is traditionally part of the propaganda tools and campaign by Kremlin. Even if we back to the Yugoslavian wars, and if we speak recently about, for example, the situation between Bulgaria and North Macedonia, the Russian-funded campaign is currently active, promoting Russia as an alternative to the West in Macedonia. Also, the topic of Kosovo and the whole discussion between the West and the local politicians is also part of the propaganda heavily used by Russia. So, in my opinion, the West should pay very serious attention to the Balkans. And I think this is one of the next regions with big tensions upcoming, thanks to also the active role of Russia with propaganda, with activating political assets. Like in Bulgaria, we see the recent news from Sofia. They are very disturbing, and signaling that Russia is deeply influenced and infiltrated the security agencies in Bulgaria. And I think it is very possible that Russia is already influencing agencies across the region, including in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And for sure, they are trying to attempt of influencing in Kosovo, but I'm not sure how it's successful, because in general, the society in Kosovo and Albania, for example, and Montenegro already are not so satisfied with Russia because of the recent events. So that is not a reason Russia to stop this campaign. I expect actually the campaign to be intensified in the next few months or year in general.